Hello, my name is Claudia Hunt. I attend the Tuesday class that goes from 2 to 4 p.m, run by Elizabeth Bryant. The context of my school, it's a co-ed primary school within northern Brisbane. There are around 350 students within the whole school, and my year 3 class had 19 students. The ratio of boys to girls was roughly equal. There were no major behavioural issues within the class, so no calling out within lessons, and a general eagerness to learn. The students were very respectful and they were excited and keen to learn, which made teaching a lot easier. There were 4 students within the class who did struggle with English writing, and there were 2 students who were not as excited to learn, however they were still respectful. Now, my focus was on persuasive text. I was attending my placement around the time that NAPLAN was coming up, and NAPLAN took place over my placement, so persuasive text was a priority. They had covered debating in the previous term, so they did have some of these persuasive skills, and they had briefly looked at persuasive text in year 2. However, my supervising teacher did inform me that it was still a very new topic to a lot of them, and some of them were really unsure when it came to persuasive writing. Now here I have listed my content descriptors. If you'd like to read them more in depth, you can pause the video now. Now my diagnostic assessment, as I mentioned, a lot of the students, this was a new topic for them, and because of that, I didn't want them to feel overwhelmed if I just told them to write a persuasive text without giving them any more information. So before the diagnostic assessment took place, we read through a persuasive text. The persuasive text was dogs are the best pets. We just looked at the general structure to give them an idea. So they did have some background information, but I didn't provide them with a lot. For the diagnostic assessment, I actually let them choose their own topic. So I said, convince me about anything. The reason I did this was to engage their interest. If there was something that they loved or were excited about, they could write a persuasive text on that. One student liked the idea of the best pets. His favourite was a mouse, so he wrote about why mice are the best. And another student loved soccer, so he tried to convince me that soccer was the best sport. So I thought this was a really good way to engage their interest. Now, of course, I know that for some students, having this put in front of them could be quite daunting, as they may need a prompt, so I did provide some examples as well. I split up the achievement standard into 3 different levels: low, medium, and high. Now, the low achieving students tended to only have a few sentences down, which was okay because I made it clear that it was not a test, even though it was an assessment for me to see where the students were at. It was okay. There was no expectation of what they had to have done in this time. They just needed to show me what they could do. And if it was only a few sentences, that was okay. I just need to know what I needed to teach. The middle achievement, you can see that there's a decent understanding on the structure with this student example, student J here. He's written body paragraphs reasonably well, but he doesn't have an introduction and a conclusion. And then the high achieving students, so here I've used student N as my example, almost wrote an entire persuasive text. I was very impressed with the high achieving students. These students were the ones who typically picked up concepts, not just in English, but across all subjects very quickly. So for them, just recapping the structure beforehand was enough. Now, the main things that I was looking for within this diagnostic assessment was the general structure. So have they done an introduction, 3 body paragraphs, and a conclusion? And then going even further, how have they structured those individual paragraphs? So for example, there's certain things you need in your introduction, such as listing your 3 reasons and your opinion. A title is important as well. And then within your body paragraph, your conclusion, and backing that up with evidence. So I was looking for those persuasive skills as well. Have they just given me their opinion and left it at that? Or have they actually gone and given me a reason why? So the data that I interpreted from my diagnostic assessment was that there were 6 low achieving students, 8 moderate achieving students, and 5 high achieving students. Of those low students, 4 of them were noted to me by my supervising teacher as students that would struggle and that I would have to differentiate my learning for. The other 2 could be pushed further, but they just needed more support. They did not need as much support. Just going over the topic a few times would most likely be enough for them. Here I've just provided another example of a low achievement standard. So there's only 2 sentences. The introduction paragraph is just 1 sentence. That's by student AR, who I cover more in detail later. Now, as a result, I looked at the student samples and I could see where the students were at and what they may be capable of achieving individually. So we catered the learning goals through a bump it up wall. So we looked at the learning intention and success criteria, developing this with the students. We wanted to give them a sense of agency, and as well as this, having realistic goals that worked for them. So the students that were high achieving could extend on their learning even further by picking a more high achieving goal on the success criteria, whereas the students who were lower achieving could have a simple goal such as just being able to write a persuasive text for an audience. This just differentiated the goals and gave the students something that they could do that supported them and was realistic. So it was something that they could achieve on their own. Going into this differentiation again, I provided these 4 students. So out of the 6, the 4 students that really struggled with a planning sheet for them to write their persuasive text. Now for these students, I wanted to start them off with just writing a really well-written persuasive paragraph. So if they couldn't think of 3 reasons and write 3 body paragraphs, if they just listed one and wrote a really, really well structured persuasive paragraph, that would be enough. There was one boy who pushed himself even further, who you can see up here. He started planning and then he wanted to go into his workbook and write up full persuasive text. Now these students I think would have benefited from some extra time allocated. This was hard as my supervising teacher had her own deadlines to meet. However, if I ran this in my own classroom, I would have given them some extra time to show me what they know. I think it would have really been beneficial for them. Now, the lessons that I ran followed a I do, we do, you do structure. So I did this over a few lessons. I did one lesson looking at the general structure of a persuasive text, and then again going into just the simple paragraphs within the text and looking at the structure of them. So here's an example of one that I constructed. As well as this, I would write one up on the board, and then to do that together, the students would give me their ideas. Why is outside play better than inside play? They would tell me an idea and we'd construct it together. So that was following on the we do. For this lesson, they were split into groups, so just on their table groups, and I gave them a persuasive paragraph within a text that I had just cut up and mixed up, and they had to stick it in the order that they thought it would occur within a text. The you do was similar to the diagnostic assessment, where they could write about anything that they wanted. So this was a good way to see how they were tracking along before the very end. I again gave some examples because I know that some students may be overwhelmed and not know what to write. So an example activity after following this structure, going into more depth with these persuasive skills, was looking at high and low modality words. We did briefly cover medium modality, however, this was a little bit confusing for them, so we mainly focused on high and low. We did a game where they would bob down or jump up based on if the word was high or low modality. We looked at sentences where they would replace the low modality words with high modality, and then applying these to their text. So in a text, if you're trying to convince someone, you don't say could, you would say must. And this really carried through, not just in a text, but in everyday conversations too. In addition to this, I also showed them evaluative adjectives that they could use within their persuasive text. So we did that through a sorting activity. I had a table. Instead of saying something is good or something is bad, what are some other words that you can use? So you could use amazing, astonishing, or disastrous and atrocious. And then they wrote some sentences using these evaluative adjectives, and again, use these within their text. Now, throughout these lessons, I was constantly monitoring student work. I was observing, taking in student samples and providing them with feedback, whether that was verbal or if it was written. I adopted the 2 medals and a mission, which was a way of feedback that my supervising teacher used. So as you can see here are some examples on how I've put it on student work. I've made notes on one, I've put the 2 medals and a mission. So it was really good because we worked together, the student and I. So I would write their 2 medals and a mission, they would look at their learning goal, and they were really part of this process, so they had that sense of agency. Another way that I tracked student progress was through check-ins. So I'd say at the end of the lesson, before they head out for break, how are you feeling? Give me a thumbs up if you're feeling really good about this. Give me a middle if you know it needs work, but you're tracking along, or a thumbs down if you think you need some support. Now, this was really good for the students who were really self-reflective. So especially these high achieving students, they were able to tell me immediately what they didn't know and what they did know. But for the students who struggled a bit, it didn't really seem like an effective way. And they benefited more from feedback and me taking their work samples and providing feedback that way. I think when seeing their peers with all their thumbs up, they would just put their thumbs up too and say all good and head out to break. even if throughout the lesson I'd been sitting with them and providing them with constant support. And even when I asked them one-on-one, not around peers, how are you going? They'd say, really good. And then with work, we're struggling a bit. So I think just asking is quite hard because some students will just say they're tracking along really well, even if they won't. Overall, I was really happy with how my teaching went on student achievement. You could see these concepts, not just within their writing, but within their everyday conversations as well. Here are examples of 2 texts that have improved majorly from these students. So you can see even just in the length of them, how much they've improved. If you'd like to pause to read more in depth, you'll be able to see the impact that the teaching has had. Here is student ARs, who I mentioned at the start. So he was the one who only had 1 sentence for his introduction and 2 sentences overall. I actually found that I had to hold him accountable. So if he knew that I was going up to him throughout the lesson, making sure that he was writing things down, he would do that and he would put in the effort. So I think with him, he was quite capable. It was from a lack of interest, but also confidence. He did require support and prompts at points, but you can see that he's structured his persuasive text well. There's a major improvement. He still hasn't got a 3rd paragraph or a conclusion, but you can see his reasons are backed up with evidence. I've circled the use of these high modality words. He said definitely and certainly. He's utilized persuasive language, and the impact of learning is clear here. With student CB, so she was the example that I showed at the very beginning for the low achievement. With her, again, she had a very short persuasive text. There were only a few sentences and it was just the introduction. Now, by the end, she has had a major improvement. She ran out of time to do a conclusion. However, if she had more time, I do believe she would have been able to successfully write one. So she's got the language in there, you must do it, those high modality words which we covered. She's followed the structure very well. She's used persuasive language. There's evidence of emotive and descriptive language as well, and overall she's demonstrated a major improvement. So overall you can see that my teaching has had an impact in students' results and their work, how they have achieved through not only the structure but also the language that they're using within their persuasive texts. Thank you.